that they're changing my voice. And this video is about how I won another debate with another person who calls himself a Christian. And I won all these debates. It just continues. And if you look at how their arguments being made and how I address their points and they don't address mine, you see why it's called a debate, and you see why I win. Okay, so just quickly to wrap this up, could you state exactly how you think unrepentant sinners should be treated by Christians in detail, please? 1. Okay, so she numbered her points because we've been talking for quite some time, and these are the key parts. This is the essence of the debate. So I kind of summed it up in 3 pages. Okay. So 1, she says, okay, this is going to take multiple messages, so don't say anything until I'm done, until I say I'm done. Okay, this is her speaking now. She says that she agrees that unrepentant sinners need to be dealt with, but the thing is that's not what she says is our job, that is God's. We are to do our best to love them and guide them. That being said, we are also supposed to go against sin. So when they sin, while we are to love them, we aren't supposed to participate. Okay? We show them how they are supposed to be by example and by refusing to join their sin. She goes on to say we can punish sin if we are in a, she goes on to say that we can punish sin if we are placed, what she's trying to say is placed in a position where we are supposed to supposed to like, if we are an actual judge, or it could be something simple like an admin in a Discord server. And they're filming right now. Bear with me. What she's saying is that if the government places you in a position like a judge, that you can then punish that sin. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's great, because they're conforming to white social norms, okay? They're not using their heads, okay? You think that God only wants you to take an active stance of judging sin and trying to suppress it, trying to deal with it, if you're placed in a position like a judge. That's what she's saying. Basically, that's what it equals, right? She is saying at a different point you're supposed to rebuke, which is her backtracking and like agreeing with me, unwittingly or otherwise. Okay, we'll get to that. Because the topic was, whether or not you should judge somebody in this sense, right? You see somebody sinning, you say, hey, you keep dressing like a slut, and, without saying it that way, you say you keep dressing in a way that's wrong, and, if you don't stop, then I'm going to stop hanging out with you. I don't want to deal with you anymore because you refuse to do what's right, okay? And that's what I worded as shunning. So should you judge them, then shun them. She's basically saying, don't judge, and then she backtracks on that, and then she says, don't shun them, okay? We'll get to that, okay? We'll get to how this person is like contradicting themselves. They're taking the stance of the mainstream Christians who say don't judge them. They usually don't talk about whether you should shun them or not because they're saying don't judge them, which is meaning don't shun them. But what happens if you don't judge them and then shun them if they refuse to do what's right is you end up serving the devil, okay? They end up taking advantage of you. You end up going to work for them, etc., etc. We'll get to that. Okay. Point number 6. But as a normal person, while we can rebuke them for a sin, she's saying that we see them do. So she's saying that as a normal person, that she can rebuke them for a sin that she sees them do. And then she says the Bible says not to judge because that's not our job, that's God's. And she even cited the part that corrects her. This is what Christians often do. She'll point to the part where it says, don't judge, you'll be judged. And it goes on to explain what is meant by that. It says, first remove the log from your own eye. Then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's. So when I pointed that out to her earlier in the conversation, she just shakes it off and goes back to parroting, the argument that you're not supposed to judge, but you are. You're supposed to be right with God and then judge. Also notice that she says we can rebuke them for a sin, which requires what? It requires judgment. Okay? Then she goes on to say that the Bible says not to judge. In the same comment that she says we can rebuke them if for a sin we see them do, the Bible says not to judge because that's not our job, that's God's. You see how when you take that kind of folly stance and you're dealing with the top martial arts, he's going to catch you, right? When a king sits on his throne to judge, he winnows out evil with his eyes. He's going to see the error in your logic, and he's going to expose it. Point 7. He punished them, not us. The Bible says to love our neighbor and enemy, to even give them stuff when they try to hurt us, to show the love of God by example, because we are representing God. We got to make a good impression, but not a misleading one. Be innocent and go against sin. So I put this here. I wrote this here to help you understand why she's wrong. It says Proverbs 27:5. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Okay. Now, one thing that's important to note, okay, is that when you're in the Spirit of God, it is God judging you, right? So if God comes into me, and I'm a prophet, I'm Isaiah, for example, in the Bible, in the story, okay, because I'm above that in real life, but it's a story for another day. But, then I can say, hey, God says stop doing what you're doing, because he's in the Spirit of God. So if you're truly a Christian, you're supposed to be right with God in the Spirit of God, which is removing the log from your own eye, and then you're supposed to judge in God's Spirit, okay? But these people never say it that way, and they never do it that way because they're not truly following God. All right, point number 9. The Bible says, be innocent like a dove, but wise like a serpent. Be innocent and let God deal with them if they reject our message. And then she says, I'm done. I'm not to act like a judge and be an example to unbelievers of what a Christian is and who God is. They may change their minds. So I put this here, Proverbs 13:20. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Now, a lot of you might make the mistake of saying, well, Jesus comes later and corrects Proverbs. He doesn't. He said he did not come to destroy the law, but fulfill. He cannot contradict. He and I'm him. And I cannot contradict universal moral precision. It is universally true that if you walk with the wise, you become wise. And it's universally true if you're a companion of fools, that you suffer harm. It's universally true. So if I'm trying to teach a bunch of people and they're doing whatever they want and and they keep injecting themselves into my life, I'm wasting time, and that's a form of suffering harm. I'm wasting time, to say the least. And Lord knows what else they whatever other harm they bring to me. So it says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion fool suffers harm. If they reveal that they're a fool, okay, God separates the light from the darkness. If they reveal that they're an unrepentant sinner who refuses to accept correction, you are supposed to push them away. Okay. Let me just read through this real quickly, and we'll get to it in part 2. All right. So this is like, I put it in order. I think it's going across this way, actually. Okay, we'll get to it. So it says, but the thing is, shunning doesn't work. Most of the time, it just pushes people away into the arms of Satan. You got to love them like Jesus did. But Jesus said, dust your feet off if they don't receive you in that town, and move on to the next. Okay? It says they're in the hands of Satan already. And you're just saying, hey, you're not responding to this obvious correction that's obviously good for you. What do you expect me to do? Now, if they come back later on and say, hey, you know what? You were right. I was wrong. But if they don't, you have to reject them. Okay. God never taught. She says, God never taught that. In fact, God is more about mercy. Look at the part in the Bible where the religious leaders throw adulterous women at his feet. According to the law we are to stone her. Jesus responded, you who is without sin, cast the first stone. He started to write in the ground. So what had happened there is that Jesus said that you aren't in the Spirit of God, so you can't stone her. He didn't say stoning is wrong. We'll get to that. All right. Over here it says, John 10, verse what? And secondly, what does that have to do with anything? I spoke about showing the love of God, and you sent a random reference. That's Jesus speaking. What's your point? And yet he didn't stone her. He didn't shun her. He didn't criticize her. He's just said you are forgiven. Okay, so what had happened there is I pointed out why I'm authorized by God to speak on it, and she isn't. And that's in John 10. We'll get to that in part 2. We're almost out of time. We've got 45 seconds. All right. It says, how did Jesus treat the moneylenders and why? Right? Did he speak to them kindly? No. He chased out their cattle and their sheep and overturned their tables, which is likely to cause a physical altercation, right? 4, okay, or so. Explain John 2:15 to me, please. Is a whip treating them kindly? It says he spent time with them, simple love. God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Jesus, being part of God, naturally wants them to know him. You see how they're kind of avoiding the argument? Okay, I didn't say don't try to speak kindly to first. I said shun them when they do the wrong thing, which is what he's doing. When Jesus was struck, he asked them, why did they strike him if he did nothing wrong? He didn't say it was wrong to strike people if they do something wrong. Also see this right here. We're almost out of time.